I think the next couple of years is going to be the proof that Clippy was 2 decades ahead of his time. Like as much
Totally
as much as we shit on it, right? Like, because it was horrible and it was goofy. What they were thinking was like, we need something to help the user guide them through what this is. When they have questions, they can come to and kind of ask. And like, but we didn't have the ability for this thing to really like detect or ask questions. It just had set motions and patterns and things that could send you to help articles or whatever. And it was like annoying, blah, 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 whatever. But now, like, okay, but what if this thing truly was intelligent?
Welcome to a new episode of All Aboard, the show where we have real conversations with IT and security practitioners. No fluff, no talking points, just straight talk from experts and advice for tackling the toughest problems facing cloud-forward companies today. I'm your host, Alex Bowie, CEO and co-founder of Conductor One. Welcome to the All Aboard podcast. This episode is special as it's super relevant to our own Copilot product launch. That's right, we're talking about the intersection of AI and identity with David Lee, the Identity Jedi. David is a veteran in identity. He's been at AWS and Sailpoint, has a massively successful podcast and newsletter following, and is the co-founder and CEO of Raincoat, an identity security company. What I love most about our talk is that David has so much historical context here. He knows what's been tried in the past and where the solutions have come up short. He also knows where identity is going and how AI will intersect with that technology to truly reshape the space. I won't give you any spoilers, so you'll just have to listen in. Let's get right to it. Welcome, David Lee, to the All Aboard podcast today. I'm stoked to be talking with you. David is one of my favorite people, longtime identity person. You might say a Jedi of sorts.
Might say.
But maybe, and today we're going to be talking about AI and LLM and identity, which I think is not as much of a talked about topic as it should be. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And This conversation was a little bit sparked by some previous conversations we had. But before we get into all that, maybe give the audience a quick intro to yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. Happy to be here. So my name is David Lee. I've been in identity and access management for just under 20 years, which I don't like to say out loud because it just reminds me of where all this gray came from. But I started out like most people. I just kind of stumbled into this thing. But I was, computer scientist by degree, software engineer, came out, wanted to be like the best software engineer in the world. And then stumbled across identity and just dove into it. I loved like all of its complicated relationships and processes and what it was trying to do. And from there, I just kind of kept going with it, right? So I started my career doing contract work for the government and then came private, did some work for companies there, ended up at Sailpoint, from Sailpoint with Amazon, with a couple of different startups here and there. Then I was like, I had the crazy ideas like, hey, I should start my own thing like every other entrepreneur does. And I'm just like, so now I'm in the middle of that run, right? So co-founder of Raincoat AI, but this field for me, identity has been, obviously it's provided a career for me. It's provided experiences that were like life-changing, phenomenal, but also I just love it, man. I love all the challenges in it. I love how it goes across the business. So for me, as a person who's not just, a techie, who's not just a nerd. I am a nerd, but like, I love like the business side of it, the sales, the marketing side of it, and identity just seeps into all these different things because you can't really make it work unless you truly understand like the rest of the business and what these things mean. So, that's me in a nutshell. And I love Star Wars, hence the Identity Jedi moniker. So there you go.
Me too. I don't know if this is like a bad question to ask, but like, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? I feel like there's a lot of different variations and iterations of goodness there. But
my favorite is Return of the Jedi, right? And it's always, I know it's going to be different for every single person, and we won't make it to the Star Wars podcast, but I'll just say this. I think the reason is because it's when I saw it as a kid, when I was younger, right? I watched the whole trilogy, right? But something about Return of the Jedi, I used to love like the scene of Luke and Leia, like in the forest on the little speeder bikes and stuff like that or whatever. Like that just stood out to me, right? Like Luke kind of coming back and facing the Emperor, all that stuff or whatever. So even over the test of time, as I've watched and I've gotten older and understand more of the movies and filmmaking in general and storytelling, like I think Empire Strikes Back is the best one. But for me personally, it's Return of the Jedi. Like if that's on, I'm going to watch it. Like, hands down.
You had my fave there, Empire Strikes Back. That's a good one.
Yep. It's hard to argue, man. It's a really good movie.
Yeah. Such a good movie. All right. Well, we won't rattle Star Wars stuff because I could talk for days about this. But yeah, look, I was excited to jump in and talk all things AI in the context of identity and a lot of the advancements that's been happening on the LLM side in particular. I think one of the interesting things about I guess AI it is a little bit of one of these terms that just kind of gets like slapped onto everything, and everything kind of is AI at some point. Just, I remember 10 years ago, everything was like machine learning. Even if you were doing, like a basic statistical analysis, it's like, oh, that was machine learning. Everything was machine learning. So,
Right.
I think one of the interesting things is AI is not new to identity in some contexts, because we kind of had some of these capabilities and technologies for a while. And I think there's been a lot of companies talking about this stuff for a long time. But maybe, in your experience, I'm curious if you've seen sort of historically, how has the idea of machine learning or artificial intelligence, LLM, been applied to identity? Because I know there's a lot of companies out there that have some capabilities in the space, and sort of where have you
No, they
seen it
don't.
historically though?
No, they don't. Yeah, dude. Listen. I'm gonna piss everybody off on this. So whatever. Listen, these are my words,
Let's
people.
go.
When you hear
Let's
this,
go.
come at me, right? Like Alex is not saying it. So it comes down to this, right? Previous identity companies, they put the moniker AI on it, but that's not what it was, right? What they were doing was advanced statistical analysis, which at the end of this, right? And I'm gonna nerd out just a little bit for some of you guys listening to it, because background comp sci engineer. Why I'm so passionate about this is because had I not decided to come out and get money, because I was tired of being a broke college student, I was going to go back and get my master's in like data science. Like this, I loved everything about this, right? So at the core, to get to anything artificial intelligence, right? The core is that you do have to, there's machine learning, there's kind of like advanced statistics. Like you have to be able to have these numbers and give a machine something that it can crunch through. And then once it builds its models, then it makes inference off of there. And what we know of as AI, right, is usually inference models. It's like, based on this stuff that I know, then now I can start kind of predicting or seeing something that's next, right? I think that the example that I like to give people, the easiest thing is like, if I set you down on a bench and I walked and I had ducks walk in front of you, right? You would just sit there and look at each duck. You'd be like, okay, there's a black duck, there's a black duck, there's a black duck, there's a black duck. At some point, you would just start to, like at 5 or 6, you was like, okay, I think maybe most of these ducks are going to be black. Then all of a sudden I said a yellow duck. You go, oh, wow, okay, yellow duck. And then if I asked you to say, guess what the next duck is, you're probably going to say it's probably going to be a black duck. Why? Because based on what you've seen, right, you've already seen a certain pattern and the number, and then you'll start like 7 out of 8 of the ducks I've seen have been this. So there's a what? There's an 80 or 90% chance the next one is going to be that, right? This is what you're getting to. You're inferring what the next thing is going to do based off the statistical analysis you've already seen. So the basis of AI is teaching the computer how to do that. How do I give it enough data and numbers, right? So, all right, so backing up. Why do I say that most of the identity companies didn't really do AI? Because number one, when they went after this, they didn't actually take the true steps to go and actually get data science and build algorithms to do that. What they said was like, okay, well, we can just get some things. We'll do like clustering and we'll do like, hey, recommendations. So we'll do some of it, but we're not really going to do the big data science cleanup behind it to really create models and infer things. We're just going to do like the little stuff, which is really just kind of, clustering and being able to do a role analysis. I mean, that's a smidget of like learning some of the things you need to do. You don't need machine learning models for that, right? Again, this is just advanced statistical analysis, but they slapped on it and called it AI. Why? Because it automatically did something for you, right? It said these things belong like this. And so now I'm leading you to do something. And so they said AI, and that's what it was, right? And that's why it fell flat. A lot of customers are just like, okay, great, but it's not
like,
really
cool.
doing anything. Yeah, right. Like, nice. How much are you going to charge me for that? Like,
that's what. So is that included in the basic package, or is that enough? So yeah, totally. So like point 100% taken. I think in the security and identity space, every company and product and vendor is a little bit subject to that like hype cycle. Like, there's a little bit of that going on for sure. And everyone sort of races to like have the story. And like, I remember everything 5-6 years ago was all about next gen. And then it was about zero trust. And, it's like, you kind of can't blame people to some degree, but I think point taken, the most important point there at some levels, it's like, is it creating a lot of customer value? And is it really solving a problem in an interesting and unique way? So I think that's super, super salient.
Yeah.
I guess taking it further, then we've had all these advancements in particularly LLMs. I mean, if you really focus it down, it's like machine learning's been around for a very long time. We've got a lot of algorithms and things like that there. LLMs really is the sea change step function difference in the last year. And that fundamentally is about language. It's about understanding large data sets of information and being able to predict the next word, doing that kind of thing. Where do you see the opportunities? Like, if you kind of took that concept of, again, these raw capabilities of take large volumes of data, of unstructured information and synthesize results, inputs, or not inputs, but outputs, predictions, whatever it is. Where do you see their opportunities from a product and problem statement standpoint?
So I'm about to make every single product manager that listens to your podcast, like I'm about to make their next 2 years of work right now. Like it is.
I was gonna say, are you creating a roadmap right here? This is the roadmap for everyone.
like literally, I'm gonna lay it all out for you. I'm gonna lay it all out for you, like because it's already there.
Notes.
Like, so literally, if we do it right, it is game changer. Feels like it's not even a big enough word for this, right? And here's the reason why. There's two things. Number one, when you talk about being able to look at data and to be able to crunch this data and to come up with analysis of paths and prediction, right? Structured data is always better. If you go and learn this, there's a difference between structured learning and unstructured learning, right? Unstructured is just like, you just go grab the data and you figure it out, kind of make a pattern. Structured is like, there's already a pattern to this data, right? So I just have to teach you the pattern. And now that you've got it, you go and find other data and kind of match it to that pattern. And I'm being really, really high level with this for you super nerds who are like, well, actually, Dave, like, whatever, right? I'm trying to keep it a level that everybody can get to. So when you look at identity, specifically security data, and what we see is a very structured set of data, right? Why? Because it's already defined by relationships. It's relational in nature by what that is. So like when I do an audit record, in that audit record, I'm already putting in an ID and what that ID is connected to and what the action is. So there's a pattern there that I can already teach something to go do. So if we look at identity and security and understand the one thing we're trying to do, whenever we're trying to prevent something or give somebody something, is understand the relationships. Like if I'm giving you access to this, I'm defining the relationship between you and this access as an entitlement. And then what does that mean? That entitlement to that resource. It's relationships. So in order to get, what's one of the most structured ways to get relationships? Well, relationship trees, edges, right? Graph databases. When you start to look at that, why? Because you can plot out the relationships. And going back to my computer science nerdy days, right? If you wanted to do a sort, doing a tree sort's actually pretty freaking efficient because I know, like once I know a certain set of the pattern, I know which part of the tree I need to go to. I don't have to worry about searching on the other branches. I can go here. So if I take that combined with, okay, say, if I understand that there's relationships here and I can model this data into relationships, and now I've got a pattern and I can put an LLM on top of that to say, okay, now that you understand this pattern and you can speak to this and you can do some prediction just like you can with English, now I can start to say, all right, what happens if now I get these questions that customers would always ask, but like your product can now deliver, like, hey, what happens if I give this person this access, right? Who is the riskiest person in my organization? And based on that, I can go look at like who has the most relationships to assets or resources. Like now, not only are you able to build things that you can actually build an interactive questioning to that, and you can actually interact with the data, but now you can truly automate because now you got a path to go towards. It's like, oh, well, I know that once it gets here, like, right, what I've seen before in this model is that let's just say 7 connections, it equals high risk, right? Because you've got so many different connection paths to this resource. Well, now what I can do is automate and look at it and goes, anytime somebody gets to 6 or 7, I'm going to go do this. And now these are actions and autonomous things that your product can now do. Why? Because it understands, it sees the model and can make these, it can make these decisions for you. And I know that maybe scares some people, but it makes the mundane decisions that you right now that you're already trying to provision or automate anyway. And you leave the bigger decisions to your actual, your identity management analysts, your business users who are looking at this and says, okay, when I do a review for you, I know all these relationships. Here's the ones I've already taken care of. Boom. I'm just going to give you 2 items. Here are 2 items I just need your input on. Like, I don't actually need you to review it. I've already done it. I know the relationships. Yeah. I know where the risk is. I'm just allowing you to review it so you know this. And that's it. And now, so many things that we think about, access review, access requests, all these things, they're no longer things that you have to go implement. They just kind of naturally come as part of the other product, right? So now what you have is this true kind of interactive system that, I mean, I see it to where we truly have an identity-based LLM, and it's, you integrate it with a Slack channel, just say somebody starts today, it's like, hey, I'm new to engineering. Like they're just talking to Slack bot or whatever and says, I need access to this. And it goes, no problem. Here you go. Like done. Like I don't have to roll anything out. Like it's for the user, it's just, I integrated with the Slack bot and this thing did it. So I truly think it's there, right? Look at like 3 Edges. There's a company out there. Shout out to the guys over at 3 Edges. They've been working on putting like identity into like graph data. But I mean, people have been looking at graph database for a while. You look at Visa and the way they like to do things with the relationships and kind of showing that relationships, even like you guys with Baton, how that brings it back in that model. Like right now, what we're going to start seeing is once people understand the data model and relay out the relationships, like building an LLM model on top of it. Now, granted, it's going to be pricey when meaning somebody's got to invest and go, build the model and get the team. But like once that's there, what you get from there is just, it's going to redefine what we think of as an identity.
Totally. And the context piece makes a ton of sense to me, like the ability to contextualize, effective access and the risk of granting something and those relationships, like all totally makes sense. One of the things you like touched on for a second, but I think there's a lot there is the human interface to these identity systems. And you gave like the Slackbot example, right? I think if you look at human experiences, I think one of the most important, powerful parts of these LLMs and AI capabilities is they have the ability to translate human asks, human concerns, human questions into actionable insights into your product. Like it's almost like a different UI for your product if you think about it that way. Like old UIs were kind of buttons and input boxes and you click things and drop downs and all that kind of stuff. And AI can predict what you want to do and it can be an interface into your existing product. Have you thought a lot about, when you gave the Slackbot example, but have you thought much about like what are the other inputs there? Like how do humans want to interact with AI systems, and do you see a lot of opportunity there?
Dude, absolutely. So I thought about this morning when I was getting ready for this. I was like, I think the next couple of years is going to be the proof that Clippy was 2 decades ahead of his time. Like,
no, it totally was. It totally was.
Like as much as we shit on it, right? Like, because it was horrible and it was goofy. What they were thinking was like, okay, what if we need something to help the user guide them through what this is, right?
Yep.
When they have questions, they can come to and kind of ask. And like, but we didn't have the ability for this thing to really like detect or ask questions. It just had set motions and patterns and things that could send you to help articles or whatever. And it was like annoying, blah, 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 whatever. But now, like, okay, but what if this thing truly was intelligent? You could just ask it questions. We saw this maybe about 10 years ago with chatbots. When chatbots started becoming a real thing, especially on the sales side, right? And now it's on every single website. You can't go to any website without this thing popping up. Bing, hey, do you want to know about blah, blah? What is it? It's a chatbot. It's just there to kind of interact with you. Again, Clippy, right? Out of its time, right? So I've always said this, like, and I'll say it here. If somebody beats me to it, God bless you, because I just want to see it get done. But to me, it's Jarvis from Iron Man, right? That's the next phase of interfacing with computing, which is we gravitate to AI and everybody goes to Terminator. And nobody was like, but you guys not see like the other uses of it. Like, I get it.
There's
but like
this whole sweet spot of Jarvis before we get to Terminator and Judgment Day.
Right. I was like, even if it's true, right? And we gotta wait for Sarah Connor. Like, we're gonna have a good decade of Jarvis,
we'll have
right?
a good time.
Yeah, we'll have a good time. So, but with Jarvis, and so for those of you who aren't, movie nerds, you haven't seen it. So in Iron Man, Jarvis is an artificial intelligence system that Tony Stark, who's the main character, uses to help him develop. But it's very much Tony. I won't say like he's the brain, like they're both the brain, right? It's literally like an artificial partner to go and do something. So Tony asks it a question or Jarvis a question. Hey, Jarvis, do this for me. It automates tasks. It does different things. While Tony's thinking of different things, all the mundane tasks that need to be done, he tells Jarvis to go do it, right? If you look at like GitHub security copilot, stuff that Microsoft's putting out, right? Even with ChatGPT, if you go in there and put in some code, like this is all towards going to that part where it's like, we're not taking away from the talent of the actual creator. What we're doing is we're getting rid of the mundane stuff that they don't have to worry about and truly allowing them to create and go, okay, if I want to go create a program, here's the things I want to go do. All right, you go build a database, go do this, go set up the routing. Like, why waste my time and all that? Let me focus on like what the actual like business value is of the app. What do I want to do? And so that's what I really think we're going to be closer to, is seeing that the future of like how you interact with different apps. Like I'm really surprised that ChatGPT hasn't had a voice prompt yet. And I haven't researched into why that's not there, but I'm like, as much as ChatGPT does, I was like, well, now just give it a voice prompt. Like, hey, like help me do XYZ, this is whatever, right? Same different things with the prompts. Now I see that kind of interactivity, right? Where you're talking to whatever interface that you're working with. I want to be able to do these things. Okay, bring back information. Great. You go do this. I'm going to focus on this, come back. Like that's the future I see. I'm kind of confident I'll see it. We'll see it like within the next I'll say 20 years. I really want to say within the next decade. I think
Yeah.
somebody can get pretty freaking close. I know,
I
granted,
think
in the movie, Jarvis did a whole lot. Like, I don't think we'll get there, but like, I think we can get close.
The pace is pretty good. I mean, one of the things that Jarvis analogy begs the question of a little bit is this idea of generalized kind of like co-pilot assistant, AI assistant for the enterprise versus domain specific. So if you think about, you know, like, I don't know what the analogy here would be versus Jarvis, but like Jarvis was effectively Tony Stark's, like, you know, he would answer everything. He'd answer engineering questions. He'd book reservations at, you know, a hotel down there. He'd figure it all out. Do you think that, in your mind, it's a little bit prediction territory, but do you think that the AI and the co-pilot needs to be domain specific? Like, does it need to be tightly bundled to the identity platform and then an AI co-pilot for writing code, which is kind of like GitHub? Or do you think there's going to be the one to rule them all effectively, like that overarching co-pilot is going to, or is there an interface between the two? I mean, maybe it's a little bit of like a not interesting question. I don't know, but I'm curious about it because I think it affects how we build things.
I think it does too, but I think that's also where the limit comes in, right? So in my mind, the domain specific is the safest. Why? Because you create a sandbox, a bundle for this thing to go and learn and grab more patterns and do, and it's very focused. One of the scariest things that I did see was it was like Auto GPT. It was like an open source program that was out there that literally, like, you give an AI like access to the internet to go and figure things out, right? It's kind of like giving a 5-year-old keys to the Ferrari. Like, because well, let's just be honest, people. Like, there's some stuff on the internet that like takes some maturity to understand what it is. This, you know, like, and there's a lot of stuff that crosses boundaries, but it's on the internet, so it's there. Like, the reason why I think it's better to have like domain models, and at some point somebody's going to push for it because we're engineers and we're scientists and we don't think about whether or not we should do something. We just do it because we can. Ian Malcolm, same thing again. Like, somebody's going to make a generalized one. And I think that's where in the danger lies, right? Is because there's a lot of information out there. And then how do you control the results that it comes back, right? And it's going to create a lot of inferences based on things that it sees. But that's the information that you fed it. So is it necessarily wrong? It's so now you get into that thing of like, well, then how do humans do it, right? And that's that whole difference between when you really talked about what is artificial intelligence and what separates intelligence from whether or not you want to call it the soul or something like that or whatever. But like, we see a bunch of stuff as humans, right? Most of us on the internet, and we just inherently, we know if something's good or bad. Right. There's just, and we can't, that's hard to really describe, and you can't really put that into like an algorithm, like this is why this is bad. It's just, there's just things that we inherently know. A computer doesn't know that, right? A computer's it's just data. And I see this much data and it did this, so I'm going to do this, like, and there's the inference to it. So bringing it back, right? I think that, you know, the domain specific models, I think in the short term are going to be, you're going to get much better results out of that. And I think you would actually get to those features that actually deliver value versus a wide ranging one, because there's so much there to do. And there's so much things that it won't be, because it's trying to crunch so much that it won't be understand, that I don't think you'll get the most accurate results back from. And I think that will give you like a poor user experience. So I think domain specific, and I'd like to see it stay there for a while.
Yeah.
Until we really get a grasp on like, you know, what does it mean? Right.
Yeah.
Like there's so much stuff that we don't know when you start to study massive amounts of data, because we've never seen anything like this. Like we're living in an age where there's so much information out there that's available. Like there's no society that's ever had this, right? So what does that mean, right? What does it mean if I give, if I were able to synthesize the entire internet to a 10-year-old and give them all that information? Are they equipped to understand what that is? I mean, those are the questions we're looking at, right? So we're expecting just this algorithm that we created to synthesize all this information and go, okay, I understand all of it, and I'll do, like, no, like, hell, we can't even do that, right? Yeah. So like, I think there's things that we need to learn and study more about this, because I do not think we are ready as a society, as a human being, to basically understand as much information as out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the danger starts. But I'll stay out of the philosophy.
We're at inflection. Well, I mean, it's interesting to talk about data sets for a second, because I think that, you know, one of the interesting dynamics of that we see evolving in the AI and LLM space is this idea of you can create, like, the technology around AI itself seems like it's rapidly becoming commoditized. So the open source models are becoming as good as the closed source models, so you look at that convergence and you think, okay, well, how do companies sort of create value then in the context of that? It's like, well, one is you just put lots of tools and features and functionality and abilities effectively around the technology itself. So scalability, things like that. And you host it as a service. And so you monetize the service. And that's like, why Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI is so important, for example.
Right.
The other thought and the other approach is that the data set itself, like the private data set, becomes super important. So if you look at Twitter, what they've done is they have built Grok. They're training it on their Twitter data set. And then they've put tweets behind a login wall. And, and so if you kind of like string those things together, it's like, well, probably the reason they did that is they're effectively making their data set a closed data set. And then their plan is to create value from it from an AI perspective. Do you think that, and so just extrapolating that for a second, when we look at like these domain specific AIs, and identity, security, and so forth, do you see any sort of like natural opportunities in the identity space to, from a private data set standpoint, like create a lot of value? Is there value to be created when you have lots of customers using something, or lots of context across an application or something like that? Like, have you thought much about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the reason why. So there was a post today that I saw on LinkedIn, and it was Mark Tremolo. I probably butchered his name. Sorry, Mark, if I did that. He brought up this fact that he was like, oh, like basically SaaS and identity didn't work, right? It didn't do what it's supposed to do. And, and I get where he was coming from, right? And I think the reason why, when I saw that post, I immediately said, yeah, because the reason why is like, we jumped and said, we're going to go to cloud, we're going to go to SaaS. Why? Because we did the money grab, subscription as a service, whatever. But we actually didn't build SaaS architecture products, right? Like the whole purpose of SaaS, right? And to have, multi-tenant is that you get a chance to take in data from all of it and fix problems at a bigger scale, and says, oh, you guys all have the same problem. I can fix it once and I can do it for everybody. But beyond that, right, what I think is, where I think there's going to be power in, if we truly have multi-tenancy across this, is that we'll start to see patterns, because for our practitioners, we've already seen it, but we'll be able to like see the patterns data wise and be able to say, okay, listen, if you're a healthcare organization, right, and we start to look at, okay, I've got 100 healthcare organizations all across this platform, and here's what their data models look like, right? Then I could tell you, healthcare administrator, when you're getting ready to go do like your access review, like this is 70% in line with the industry, right? Like right. I truly have models and data that I can do and I can drive things off of, right? Because now like we can see into that. Now, granted, I get it. We're talking about identity data. There's all this stuff, but I was like, but like we can figure that out, right? You can create the models and keep the actual data private to the user, but like the relationship between user to asset to resource, that's what's important. That's what I need on a wide scale. What it actually is, that's yours, right? And we can truly separate that. There's sharding technologies, there's technologies there to go do it, but it just means you've got to re-architect. If you're a legacy vendor, you've got to go re-architect, right? I'm gonna throw out the L word, piss more people off, because you can't build it on top of the stuff that you already have. Like it's too much, right? Which is why I think it's going to be interesting to see as we grow with this how that happens. As newer companies, smaller companies that are a little bit more agile, don't really have a bunch of tech that they can pivot on it and go, okay, well, or we could add this function to it, versus some of these bigger ones who already have these big customer bases. All like that's a huge effort to go and undertake. And for the most part, companies don't like to do that.
Yeah,
just don't.
It's such a catch-22 for those companies, because it's like, you have big customer bases, but you got to figure out your technology probably is not built to assume any sort of assumption around AI and LLM technology. Like the retrofit would be huge, especially what you're doing. You're retrofitting it. You're taking an old 1993 Chevy S10. You're trying to put like a Tesla Cybertruck motorized engine in it or something. A terrible example. Well, David, this is great, man. I know this was like a little bit of it's a primer. I know we didn't go super deep in a lot of different topics, but I think this is just a great teaser topic to like get everyone in the identity space, like get their sort of ideas flowing around how you could think about using AI and LLMs in the context of identity and access management. I think it's it feels under-tapped right now, truly, to your point earlier. Like, we've kind of had some retrofits. We've had some things called it AI in the past, but it doesn't really feel like it's executing and delivering on the core problems and the hardest problems in the space. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to it. I want to see what companies come out and put out there. I mean, obviously there's some stuff that me and my guys are working on, but I think it's going to be a renaissance for this industry, right? I think it's going to really push and inspire a lot more innovation. And I've been saying it for the past year that identity is on the verge of evolution, right? It's at that next stage where it needs to figure out where it's going next, both technology-wise and value-wise. And I think now with the tech that we have, I think you're going to see it get pushed, right, to that point. So where, like I said, I think in the next 5 years, like, we won't recognize the systems. They won't look the same anymore, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a missed point, actually, sometimes, is like just the interfaces into these systems is going to feel different. There's clearly going to be companies that are kind of AI native and then companies that are retrofitted, and it's going to look very different. Thanks for being on the show, David. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, bud.
See ya. Thanks for tuning in. This episode of All Aboard is brought to you by the team at Conductor One. We'd love to hear your feedback. Send us a message at allaboard@conductor1.com. Till next time.